Hello everyone. Out for a little paddle today. Thought it'd be as nice a setting as any to have a little chat about cameras and the way that we use them to record our lives as normal people, not as professionals, filmmakers, what have you. Or as filmmakers. There's an overlap that happens that I find particularly fun to navigate, as well as difficult and confusing at times. So, you know, I've been documenting my life pretty regularly for the better part of 10 years now. And, you know, back in those days, I had such a simple setup. You know, I got my first real camera, my first mirrorless camera back in like 2014 or 15, yeah, and it was, you know, when the A6000, the Sony A6000 was still fairly new. And I took that thing everywhere. I didn't have any kind of rig on it. I just had a simple camera body, and that was enough. We're kind of overexposed, aren't we? Let's close it down a little. Yeah, what can you do? You gotta pick one in this case. I think that's pretty good exposure. What do you think? Might be clipping a little bit back there, but I can roll with it. I don't want to be any darker. So yeah, anyhow, the A6000, you know, I had come out of I guess I was still in a pretty prolific period of 35mm film photography, as I talked about last time. So I had these Minolta lenses. I had a nice little 50mm 1.4, 28mm 2.8. And between those two lenses, I shot basically everything with just a simple adapter. And, you know, that camera did not have log, it didn't have, you know, I don't even think it might have had picture profiles, but I never used them. I didn't even really mess with them. Just in the standard profile, I shot that thing, and I would take it on backpacking trips, no cage, just a freaking bare bones, tiny little camera body with a light manual lens, but like a nice mechanical, tactile prime lens. And I shot some really great stuff with that. When I go back and look at the videos I made, just as simple as they were, I'm really impressed. And, you know, in many cases, they're better than the videos that I would shoot when I started to kind of try to refine my backpacking camera setup and really think it through. I'd be like, oh, you know, I really want autofocus so that I can set up these shots and not have to, you know, manually focus. I can set them up on a tripod, or I can shoot while I'm hiking and not have to worry about the focus. And it is a hassle, you know, to use manual focus while you're on the move, trying to be on the move and not, you know, hold people up or cause a delay or a big distraction from what you're doing. And you're trying to get your focus, you're trying to set up these shots, and somebody needs you over here, or you're supposed to be going and you're like running back to get the camera. It can be kind of annoying, especially if the people with you are not like fully on board with what you're doing. And I'd say that in most cases, people don't really care, but even if they are a little bit annoyed by it, if you can fight through that and actually make a video and you get to show them Most people are usually sold after that, like, okay, this is a good idea. This was a worthwhile annoyance. And then, you know, so you can kind of condition the people in your life who you do things with to get used to that, to get used to your photography or whatever. But this quest for the perfect camera, the perfect travel setup, it's never ending on multiple levels because there are so many different kinds of travel. There are so many different kinds of outings. You know, there's the everyday ones. There's the little adventures, let's call them, where you and the family go to a park, or you and the friends go to, you know, go on a little hike, or like go to the skate park, or go to the city, or, you know, whatever it is that you like to do with your friends or your family on a, you know, something you might do every 2 to 4 weeks, you know, the little adventures. And, you know, you want that camera, you might want to make a thing of it, you know, you might want a slightly nicer camera, you know, maybe you want a manual lens, maybe you want 2 lenses. You're going to need enough batteries, so you're going to need like a little pouch or some kind of bag that you can keep all that stuff in and readily accessible. But you don't want it to be, you know, depending on what you're doing, you don't want it to be too obtrusive, you don't want it to get in the way or slow you down, anything like that. So you could be kind of tempted to maybe just roll with your phone. That can work. But you're very limited, and I'd say, I don't know, you just can't shoot the same way with your phone. Like maybe if you rig it out and really make a camera out of it, you could get in that mindset, but I've always had a hard time getting into that mindset of like, I'm shooting, this is what I'm doing, when I'm just using a phone. Same with like an action cam. That's another really good obvious choice, to get like your GoPro or something like that, roll with that. Problem with that is there's so few looks you can get. There's not much variety. It's all going to be super wide angle. It's, you know, if you get up close to something, it's going to be out of focus. It's just not the best option. So then you get into real cameras, you get into mirrorless setups. And it's just a matter of how big is the camera? How big a part of what you're doing is video? You know what I'm saying? Are you out there to make a video? And that's like a dedicated part of your plan? Even if nobody else is, you know, if you decide like, yeah, we're going on the trip and I'm going to make a little travel film. I'm gonna make like a little 5 to 10 minute video capturing as much as I can and then editing it down. Documentary style work, practice, so to speak, can be. Okay. So if that's the mindset you're approaching it from, then you're going to want to do a little bit more. You're going to want to give yourself some creative options. You're going to want to, you're going to be okay with the burden of a slightly bigger camera and a slightly more involved setup. And that's going to require more attention out of you. But hey, if that's what you want to do, cool. That's, in a lot of cases, that's what I want to do. It's just like, you know, when you start rigging out your camera, when you start getting mics and cages and handles, top handles, side handles, filters, matte box, you know, wireless mics, on-camera mics, arms, monitors, you know, I've got a pretty involved setup right here that I'm using this like on the daily right now for just like documenting my family. This is just on the tripod like this, and I've just conditioned myself to grab it and roll with it as it is. I really need to probably stop shooting S-Log for this family stuff though. But I've got a pretty good workflow with it, so it's not bothering me. Anyhow, you start accumulating all this stuff, and now the range of options of like, what camera am I gonna bring, goes from just like this one or this one or this one to like this one, this way, this way, this way, or this way, this one, this way, this way, this way, this way, or this way. You get all these different choices. Are you gonna put this on? Are you gonna put that on? Are you just gonna roll like this? Or are you gonna go with that, this and that? Am I gonna get the monitor and batteries for the monitor? I mean, you can quickly have a pretty substantial amount of stuff you've got to carry if you go that far with it. And you know, sometimes you want to, but if weight is really an issue, you might not want to do that. So I have spent many evenings before a trip, or just, you know, the hour before an outing, reconfiguring cameras, trying to decide like how far do I want to go with it? Do I want to just throw this in the bag and be done with it, and maybe I'll pull it out, maybe not? Or do I want to be like, okay, here's the freaking camera and it's ready to rock. I can't ignore it. You know, it's big and it demands my attention, and I'm gonna have fun doing it. They're two very different approaches, and there's a sliding scale all the way through. So you kind of have to, the key thing is you have to figure out, what are you doing? What is your plan? What do you want to make? You have to envision some sort of end product. Or you have to recognize that you don't really care about an end product, and you kind of just want to bring a camera because that's what you do. That's okay, I've done that, you know. You come back with some footage, and maybe you use it, maybe you don't. Or are you trying to make something? Because if you're trying to make something, and you're bringing a camera that is worthy of making something, you need to shoot very differently. And I don't just mean better or more thoughtfully about your exposure or whatever. I mean, you've got to get the coverage. Like, so many times I have gone out with this thought in mind, even with the thought in mind that I'm going to make something cool out of this trip, and I just do not get the coverage I need. I lose my steam. Maybe something kind of goes wrong, or there's an unintended, you know, a hiccup in the plan, or things get unwieldy and your hands are occupied and you just like miss a critical moment. And then it snowballs, and you realize you've kind of missed that, and you don't go get the camera for this, and maybe you just get in a bad mood about it and you lose a whole evening. And when that happens, it's very hard to then go, it's kind of like, I keep a daily journal. It's kind of like if you miss like 3 days of journaling, it's hard to go, you want to go back and like fill it in before you do today, because you're like, the story is incomplete. And that's what happens when you don't get enough coverage of your stuff. You have to think about what's happening in a different way. And you have to make sure that you have shots that would represent each phase of the story. You need to think about your establishing shots. You need to think about the tight shots of the people and the emotion, and maybe, you know, what they're saying. See, so that, you know, and if you roll enough on your friends, you're gonna get some choice sound bites, and maybe you don't even recognize them until you're in the edit. But that's what the edit is for. You know, you'll want to get your wides of the scene. You'll want to get your shots of the vehicle pulling away, maybe, if you have the stomach to say, hey, I'm going to leave the camera. It's not that big a deal, but you know, so sometimes you can get weird about imposing this on people. But again, once they know what you're doing, and once they know that you know what you're doing and that you make cool stuff, they'll be happy to accommodate you. So when you've been through enough repetitions of this, you know, bringing a camera and then not wanting to be bothered with it, or it's too much to deal with and you don't get the shots, or you don't feel like bringing this tripod, but then you never show up in the footage. There's all these different variables, you know, depending on what you bring. You're going to be limited heavily in what type of shooting you can do. Like these early videos I did, it was just handheld, like I said, handheld with a little mirrorless body and a small manual lens, you know, a slightly wide and a normal, you know, a 28 and a 50. And I'd just go back and forth between those two. And I was just shooting my friends. We're hiking, getting the feet, getting the campsite, getting the setup, getting something funny they said. And like the stuff came out great because I just had a mode that I was operating in and I just rolled with it. And I did it fully from morning until bedtime. And I have complete days all the way up until the car ride home. And that stuff was great. It's just when you start slacking and losing parts of it and losing steam that you start to be like, this is not really worth the trouble. And you just put your camera in the bag, or you know, maybe you realize you don't have enough battery and I've run out of battery, you know? That sucks. Because even if you had the momentum, now you've just got a bunch of dead weight on you, and it takes a little bit of effort to learn how many batteries you need for how long of a trip. Now, unless you're going out into the wilderness, it's not really that much of an issue because you can bring a charger and you can charge your batteries at the end of the night. But if you like to do stuff outdoors, it's a consideration. Always bring more batteries than you think you need. So as much as I love that nice nimble run and gun manual lens setup, one of the other downsides of it is you cannot easily give the camera to someone and say, hey, get some footage of me doing this, or, you know, give it to my wife and say, hey, get some footage of me and my son doing this. And you gotta say, oh, you know, is it too, here, stop it down, use the aperture ring, you need to focus manually. No, it's the ring on the outside. Yeah, it's that one. Look for, and if they don't, they have to acclimate to your camera, you know? If it's just a wide lens with an autofocus, you can just point, they can just point it like it's a phone and there's no issue. But it's like driving a manual transmission car. It's like very fun and enjoyable, and you know, the experience is great, but in most cases, you're gonna be the one driving because you cannot count on the people around you to know how to do it well enough to bother giving it to them. So that's the other thing. Much to consider in this world of documenting your life. But you just have to enjoy it. You have to experiment. You have to commit to the plan. You know, it's fun to experiment and come up with different ways to get different shots under certain restrictions. That I have found restriction is the mother of creativity. It's the thing that makes you think differently. It's the thing that makes you work and solve problems. And that restriction also, it gives your stuff a certain style. If you don't have a tripod and you've only got like a 50mm lens and you're just out there and you're like, this is what I'm gonna use, cool. That's a very versatile focal range. You can do a lot with it. So see how much you can do with it. Maybe you wanna roll with just like the 20mm and you're just gonna go out with that. Like, okay, it's a bit more of a challenge, but some certain creative options open up for you. You can more easily get footage of yourself. You're going to probably only do that if scenery and the environment is a big part of what you're gonna be experiencing. And those lenses also typically have a better minimum focus distance. So you can get right up on something, but you know, getting close up on a person with a 20mm lens is kind of kind of intense in the way that it distorts. Even if it's not a very distorted lens, it still has a weird effect, not very flattering. So it's going to keep you at a certain distance. Likewise, if you go with something like, you know, a 50mm manual lens on a, a 50mm manual lens on a crop sensor camera, like an APS-C camera, like an A6000 series, that's a bit tight, you know? 75 is in there. You are getting detail, you're getting faces. You have to step away, way away if you want to get a scene, if you want to get a whole like area. You're only going to be able to get portions of it, but that can be cool. That can be a look. If you just lock in on a certain focal length, I think that's a really good creative exercise to just restrict yourself in that way. Zoom lenses are really cool. They're really helpful, especially like for documentary. I don't know, man. That's an eternal debate. Which one is better? They both have their upsides, but I can tell you one thing. Primes are lighter and they're smaller, so that makes them a pretty big contender when you're running and gunning with a bunch of other stuff that's not video related, like your whole sleep kit and your food and your water and a heavy backpack to hold it all. Or if you're in a car, if you're traveling by vehicle and you've got a lot of stuff in there, maybe you can carry more. You can bring a whole Pelican case. I've done that before, and it's a pretty nice. You just want to have some sort of base of operations that you can work out of, whether it's a bag or a case of some sort. You have to enjoy making these systems and setting up these kits. I think most of us have come to appreciate that kind of thing, but you know, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot more than just like picking cool gear and like nice gear. You really affect the kind of time you're gonna have by the gear that you choose to bring and the camera setups that you opt to go with. Just some food for thought. Something that I think people who either just are casual hobbyists or professional filmmakers struggle with just the same, because when it comes down to shooting home movies, your professional, creative, perfection striving, you know, work mind can really get in the way of just getting the shots, or having a camera that's nimble and ready and unobtrusive enough to just pull out when something's happening and you don't have to like rig something up or, you know, manipulate a whole bunch of obnoxious settings. You got to know that thing. You got to have it in a state that's like ready for home, like a baseline kit that you break it down to and you can just roll with it without having to do a bunch of mess. So anyhow, I think I've made my point there. We are rolling back to our landing zone. Thank you all for joining me for this little paddle and a chat about gear. It's just the kind of stuff I think about, you know, the philosophy behind gear choices and creative restriction is all very interesting to me. So I hope that if you liked this chat, you'll join me again soon. This is my third one in 3 weeks. I can't believe it. I've never been so successful with YouTube before. So I appreciate you all talking with me, hanging out, chatting about cameras. We'll do more of it. And I got a lot of different ideas for variety. It's not just gonna be my talking head. Although I do like these, I like watching this kind of video, just these chill kind of rambles on a particular topic. You know, hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I tried to keep it concise. As someone who has a lot of experience both in professional videography and filmmaking, and as someone with a lot of experience in home movies and documenting my life, I think I've got a unique skill set and a unique perspective to share that can apply to a lot of different people who like cameras. And if that's you, please subscribe, stick around, and I'll see you next time.